So Patrick, a couple of days out from a national election, still feels like the election that's like Seinfeld show, not really about anything, and also one where there seems to be a lot more people lined up to vote against something, either President Obama or the Republican in their state, than for something.
Yeah, I mean, we have not had a prevailing theme for the last 2 years, and to the extent that we had one in 2012, it was kind of about the president, so this election is also about the president to the extent that it's about anything at all. I think one of the things we've seen in the last week or so is tightening in a lot of places that suggests, you know, what we've known for 6 months to a year, that this was going to be a close election, that was going to go down to the wire. You look at Alaska, I don't think anyone really has a good sense of what's going to happen there. The Republican had been up in a lot of public polls, but everyone acknowledges that it's a notoriously difficult place to poll because there are all these outer frontiers, that outer people without phones or computers or mailing addresses, so it's tough to reach those people. So I think that's kind of an unknown. And then on the Democratic side, it looks like New Hampshire has really gotten a lot more competitive. This is probably just natural tightening. This is going to be a tough year for the Democrats, but you know, we were always expected these races to get a lot closer down the stretch, and I think that's a lot of what we're seeing.
And inevitably, people kind of come home at the end, but I think the question for the Democrats all along has been, will our guys not just come home, but come out? And that's, you know, to the extent the president can help, that's probably what he's supposed to do in the last few days, right? Get Democrats to show up.
Right. That's the big question, is how well the Democratic turnout operation is going to do and how much that's going to be able to hold off whatever wave-ish there is this year. The president's going to try to rally some folks. He's been doing that this week. He'll do his first Senate campaign appearance on Saturday.
Wow.
Yeah.
A breakthrough.
Yeah, and it's a real close, tight race in Michigan.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's been to me. I think Gary Peters, the Democrat, it's the one state where the Democrat is actually allowed to be seen in the same camera frame with the president.
Right, but because he's running away with things.
Yeah, and Detroit has a lot of black voters that they need to turn out.
But I looked at some just to see ads at the end, and so I looked at some this week, and there's American Crossroads, which is the big Republican super PAC, which does kind of prepackaged ads for various Republican candidates, or really against various Democratic candidates in these key Senate races, and every one has the same theme. You know, Kay Hagan is with Obama on Obamacare.
Allison Lundergan 97% of the time.
96 or 97% votes with Obama. And then in Kentucky, it's Allison Lundergan Grimes is with Obama on the attempt to kill coal. Whatever it is, it's X candidate is with President Obama. Even in times when, you know, we all lived through the George W. Bush dip in popularity in 2006, this seems even more focused on President Obama.
When we don't have a sense of what Republicans are running for. I mean, I don't think the Republicans even really know what their majority would look like if they were to get it at some point over the next 2 months, because we may not know the election result next Tuesday. But yeah, the one theme they keep going back to, Candor Media, which tracks all the advertising, #1 with a bullet is anti-Obama. Yeah. That is like the ad that has run, because it is basically in every Republican's playbook to run those spots.
Yeah. You know, Kristina, the thing we've talked about least, I guess, by us, I mean everybody in the Washington echo chamber where we all reside, is the House, the House races, which you've spent some time looking at. But you know, everybody knows the Republicans will keep control of the House, but it really does matter whether they add to their majority in the House, and that's an unexplored question, although you've looked at it and think maybe there's a chance they will.
Yeah, I mean, House Speaker John Boehner has one of the worst jobs in Washington trying to control those guys, and if he has, you know, 10 more Republicans in his conference, that makes his life easier, especially if Republicans do win the Senate and you're trying to get legislation through both houses. Having more people to work with probably makes that easier, although they are losing some people who have been a thorn in the side of House leadership and probably gaining some as well.
The new thorns in the side. Well, that's the question. They gained seats in 2010, and it didn't make his job easier. I mean, they took control, obviously, and that was good, but a whole lot of the control came in the form of Tea Party members.
Right. Well, I think the question here is how many of the Democratic incumbents lose and districts that they flip to Republicans, because there you do have an improvement from House Republican leaders' point of view if you're dealing with a Republican as opposed to a Democrat.
You mean a Republican who wins in a swing district because they're probably not likely to be as far hard over on the Tea Party agenda as some other people, and maybe more amenable to following the leadership.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So this might be a crop of people who are more likely to listen to John Boehner than some of their predecessors.
Right. If you look at Minnesota in the 8th Congressional District, currently held by Rick Nolan, who can be a fairly progressive Democrat, if Stuart Mills, the Republican, wins there, he's more of a pro-business Republican, seemingly. I mean, you never know what happens when people end up in Congress, but you know, he may not be the bomb thrower that some of these other guys are.
And the other reality is that if Republicans take control of the Senate and have whatever majority they have in the House, those House Republicans are going to spend more time negotiating with Senate Republicans than fighting President Obama, I think, after this. The dynamic changes a lot for them.
Well, we will see how that actually shakes out.
You're not so convinced.
Or they could work together to fight.
Well, you're right. That might be the
But
most
they have
likely
always
outcome.
undercut themselves. I mean, you know, it's been a small block of House Republicans that have
Right.
undercut the Speaker at every turn, and that has really hurt his leverage with the President, because the White House can kind of sit back and say, hey, John, you know, you passed something, we'll deal with it, but until then, we don't want to talk about it. Do you sense that the dynamic is going to shift at all if they're able to pick up 5-10 seats? Or I don't even know, I don't know how the primaries have played out, but maybe the makeup of the House Republican Conference is changing in a way that would be beneficial to John Boehner.
Well, definitely the sort of veteran lawmakers see this as an opportunity to get something done, even if it's small bore bills that have some bipartisan agreement, like Keystone.
Yeah.
But there are still people in the House Republican Conference and people elected in the primaries who are going to want to be more aggressive than that. So how they're going to reconcile those two philosophies is not clear.
Yeah. Well, that gets to the other topic I wanted to talk about, Carol, which is the stakes in this for President Obama. So if you look at this from his point of view, what do you know? You know at a minimum you're going to have a more Republican Congress. At a maximum you have a Republican control of all of Congress. That's not good for Democrats. I guess I have written and argued it's not necessarily so terrible for him, because if Republicans are in charge, they're also responsible, and that's not really been so clear before. So if you are responsible, you have to take responsibility. But I'm not sure everybody in the White House agrees with me on that.
Well, I think after 3 cycles of the president going out, or 2 cycles of the president going out and saying that if X happens in Congress, then Republicans will be willing to deal with him, and having that not come true on any of these under any of these scenarios, there's little hope that that'll change. But that hasn't stopped the White House from hoping that if there is a Republican Senate and a Republican House, that the president would be able, that Republicans are going to need to show that they can govern and be adults, particularly if they're going to set themselves up reasonably in 2016, because their numbers are not good, and in fact are worse in a lot of places than the president's. So there's that hope out there. I think the one emerging theory is that if Democrats retain control, then you may be in a more of a status quo kind of gridlock situation.
Well, the flip side to my happy scenario, in which it's easier to get things done when power is cleanly divided, is Democrats, particularly in the Senate probably, would have no particular interest in allowing the Republicans to look like they're good, competent, effective legislators and governors, and so why would they go along with that?
That's where the game continues. You know, basically everything you've seen in the last 4 years happens on the flip side, and the only way in which you could envision a scenario like that where something actually gets done is if the president's really willing to put himself out there and show some muscle, but you haven't seen him be that kind of a risk taker yet.
It's a hard dynamic. I mean, let's assume Republicans take over and Mitch McConnell's the majority leader. It's a really tough dynamic for him. You know, let's see, there's no scenario that shows them getting more than 53 seats, and even that's probably a stretch for them. And when you look at, you know, who they're going to beat, well, they're beating all of the Democrats in red states who would be the kind of natural allies if they were to reach across the aisle, because the 60-vote threshold remains kind of what you need to get anything done. And Democrats, as you know, they're going to have no need to reach out and work with Republicans because they want to make them look bad heading into the next election.
So you're right, because who are the Democrats most likely to go away? It's moderate Democrats. It's Kay Hagan in North Carolina. It's Mark Pryor in Arkansas. It's Begich in Alaska. So the people, to the extent there was a bridge between the two sides of Congress ideologically, the bridge is what's going to collapse here.
Yeah, but part of if you can even use those lawmakers' votes depends on how much leadership wants to compromise.
Yeah, that's true.
So even if we're winnowed down to Joe Manchin, you know, whether or not he can be a player depends on what the bill is. And I think there is an appetite to bring bills to Obama and make him have to decide whether or not he's going to veto. Republicans want there to be that clear choice.
Yeah.
Is that something that Obama, you think, welcomes, or?
No. No. That means decisions and all kinds of things.
Well, there have been presidents who liked the veto.
Right. But
he didn't look like one of them.
But if you look at something, take Iran sanctions, just
Yeah.
if you were to use that as an example, Harry Reid has been Obama's guy who kept this issue that had broad bipartisan support from even coming up for a vote and becoming an issue. And even if you were the White House, even the fact, their view was that even if it was voted on in the Senate and he vetoed it, it could imperil what they were trying to do with Iran. And so if you have a Senate that sends a bunch of things to the president, and he's stuck vetoing them, that's not a scenario. That is one of the reasons why one of the many reasons why a Democratic Senate would be much more beneficial to the president.
Right.
Well, we may or may not know the answer to these questions next week, depending on how many runoffs there are, but we'll be here to talk about it all on Capitol Journal. Hope you'll join us. Meantime, you can join the conversation on Twitter at #WSJ Live. I'm Jerry Seib.